future learning and development opportunities that we have. So just to let people know that we are recording the session. So welcome everyone to today's session. This is session 2 of 4 of our learning webinar series with Sam and Karen from the Making Data Count team, where we're focusing on Proud2bOps does data and information. And we know we've got a next 45, 60 minutes of some really energizing conversations, and Sam and Karen never fail to entertain, let's say. So hello, I'm Emma Challenge Rasool. I'm your chair of Proud2bOps. So it's really great to see so many of you in the space this afternoon. If you are active tweeters, socializers, please do signpost colleagues who would value being a member of Proud2bOps, but also be part of our learning and development and live webinar sessions that we do run very actively based on what you need and you tell us will add value to you, your role, and importantly, the patients within your communities. It's really important just to remind people of our values and behaviours as a network. So we really take great pride and hold these dearly as a network, that these spaces are a safe, supportive space where we can all come together to learn, to develop, to feel energised, but also to respectfully challenge and be curious in this space as well. So please support each other over the next 45, 60 minutes, help idea generation, but also let's hopefully have a little bit of fun at the same time. So please do continue to respect our values and the behaviours that we expect in this space, and please let's help and support each other over the duration of the session. Thank you. So just a quick update in terms of how our Proud2bOps movement is progressing and growing. We continue to add tens of members to Proud2bOps on a weekly basis at the moment. So we are spreading and growing at scale, and that's all down to you all for continuing our movement, supporting it and spreading the word about Proud2bOps and our professional network for colleagues from one end of the country to the other. Last week we launched in our 10th trust. So we have 10 Proud2bOps at trust networks now as well, and we have many more planned for this year. So we'll continue to connect and develop and energise operational managers from being a new manager all the way up to a chief operating officer. So if you would like to be a trust network, please do get in touch with us, and we'll be more than happy to have a conversation about what's involved. Just to also say, like I said, this is 2 of 4 live webinar sessions with our around Proud2bOps does data and information. The next 2 is in June and July, and those are the dates of the 2. And we've also got starting later this month a dedicated webinar series with NHS One Finance, where we're delivering sessions around financial management for operational managers. And we've got quite a number of sessions in that. So please do get involved. Head over to our website for more information. And finally, I'm pleased to say that on the 5th of November, we will have our Proud2bOps annual congress, and for the first time ever, Proud2bOps awards incorporated into that. So we will be sending all details, how to book a place at the event. Last year, we attracted over 250 operational and system level leaders. So we know that this year is going to be another exciting event for us all. So without due course, I am going to shut up and I'm going to hand over to our guests, both Sam Riley, Director of Making Data Count, and Karen Hayllar, who's a Senior Manager working very closely with Sam around this key and important area. So I'm going to actively hand over and welcome Sam and Karen. Thank you.
Thanks, Emma. So I'm going to attempt to share the screen. So Karen, you can wave at me when it's appeared.
Yep, suited.
Excellent. So lovely to see everybody. So it's not just about the charts, it's about the words as well. We are going to be reflecting on my homework though. We're hoping that you joined our first session. So yes, this is us. These are our jobs, but of course we're going to enter into our little role play as we work through this. So I am, of course, Assistant Director of Ops at St Elsewhere NHS Trust. And Karen is a fantastic head of BI. And if you remember, I started my job quite recently at St Elsewhere. So we did set you, well, we didn't set you some homework, but we set you a few things that you might want to do. Did any of you have a look at what visualizations you've got in your reporting? You can type in the chat if you like. Did we end up with any sad faces where you were seeing bad visualizations? Or maybe you found that actually you had some fantastic reporting in place already, or maybe you were in between. The good news is, Karen, that I did go away on the basis of your advice last time, and I have created quite a few charts that I'd be really keen to show you.
Well, I can't wait, Samantha. I can't wait.
Excellent. So I did create quite a few, and here's a selection.
Yes. Interesting.
Aren't they lovely?
Lovely. There may be a couple of things we need to talk about here, I think.
But I've used your tool. Yeah, that must make you happy.
Yeah, I can see that you've got those lovely orange and blue dots, and we can see icons. So that's a really good start, Sam. But we might need to have a little look in a bit more detail.
Okay, well, let's have a look then. So, Karen, this chart, just to explain what it is, so it's daily admissions, and this is for the trust overall. I have to say, I wonder if there's been a bit of an error in your teaching, because I'm not sure this is very helpful because it's quite spiky. You might want to change what you teach.
Well, it is very spiky. Now, you can see those very high points, lots of them there, Sam. And do you think you know what they are, or shall we ask the people who are watching us today to suggest what those very high points on our admissions chart might be?
I think we should ask people. So any ideas, guys, about what these high points are? This is daily admissions to St Elsewhere. What might those high points be? So Kevin's saying it's a specific day of the week. Any ideas on what day it might be?
Well, yes,
Ooh,
there we go. I think
there
we've
we
got a
go.
few people who've worked it out. So despite the fact that we have been working towards 7-day services for the whole of my career, which is very long now, actually, we still admit far more people on a Monday than on any other day of the week. So there we go. Those are the Mondays. Now, the problem with this chart, Samantha, is it's got Mondays and it's got Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays and Saturdays, and they're all very, very different. So this is a type of seasonal data. It's very predictable. We admit more people on a Monday than we do on other days of the week. And the problem with this chart is it's not just one process we're looking at. You have to consider Mondays as a different process from the other days of the week. In fact, you might want to split it up like this. So you can see there's my Monday admissions. You can see Tuesday to Thursday. We have got some points where there's a run of higher. And remember from what we did in the first step, if you've got blue dots, that represents high or good performance. If you've got orange dots, that's low or concerning performance. So we've got some statistically significant patterns in those data, Tuesday to Thursday. Fridays are a bit lower than that. And the weekends are, of course, much lower than Mondays because we don't admit patients on a Monday. So when we do that, we can begin to see the patterns in the data that are hidden by all of that noise because we're not looking at a single process. So does that make more sense to you, Samantha?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I see what you mean. So I need to split out the data if I'm seeing those very spiky patterns.
Yeah, and I would always say if you're looking at daily data, you either have to look at separate days or you have to look at weeks as a whole. Now, this is another fascinating one. So again, this is this discharges from your hospital. So what do we think those low points are on this one?
Well, I think we should see if anybody in this session has a view. Oh, well, we didn't even need to ask the question there. Look, people are thinking it's weekends, Karen.
And they're absolutely right. So despite the fact we admit more patients on a Monday than we do on any other day of the week, we discharge less patients at the weekend. Now, have you been working as a trust to try and improve your discharge rate? Looks like you might have been, but I think we need to separate out those Monday to Friday set of data from the weekend data so we can really see what's going on here. Ah, excellent. So there we go. Now you can see that all your efforts have paid off, because we can see there are a far higher level of discharges towards the end of this period. You're doing quite well at getting people out of hospital. But that was hidden, wasn't it, in the noise of every day of the week. So that's a really much more helpful picture. I expect those low dots relate to bank holidays, you know, May Day and Easter. But apart from that, when we just look at Tuesdays to Mondays to Fridays, we can see that you're discharging a much higher number of patients every day than you were at the beginning of the year, and we couldn't see that when we looked at that combined data set. So that's a much more helpful way to look at the data.
It is, and this is going to really impact upon the flow, isn't it? I'm wondering if the Making Data Count team might be able to come up with a little tool later this year that might help people understand flow through their hospital. I'll task you with that, Karen.
Thank you.
Because you're not busy enough, I'm sure.
Not busy enough, no.
Okay. Now, Karen, somebody has mentioned to me that I shouldn't use SPC for sickness data. Now, I've got a colleague from my old trust who emailed this over to me, and clearly she has used SPC for the sickness data. Why might somebody have said don't use it for sickness?
Well, sickness data is a bit like that weekly, daily data we're looking at. It has patterns in it. The problem with seasonal sickness data is that we can't really predict when the winter or the summer's going to be. But would you say you can tell when those periods are in this data, Sam? Can you see when we've got summer and winter in our data?
I think so. So it's not necessarily exactly the same months, but I think we can see a clear pattern going on here, can't we?
We absolutely can. And that's because it's not consistent when winter occurs. So we might get the beast from the east in November and December, or January and February, and that will affect staff sickness. But that's not hidden. So I still think this is a useful way to look at your data so you can see those patterns through the data. But of course, we do always need to check that there is a seasonal pattern in our data, because sometimes it's not there. We often hear people saying, oh, it's because it's winter or because it's summer, but actually we need to check that that pattern is in our data before we make those assumptions.
So I think you're saying we can't assume seasonality. We need to plot the data over time. We need to test if seasonality is there. And then if we are seeing strong patterns like the discharge example or with the sickness example, we might want to create separate charts.
Yeah, I think we'd want to do that if we can. Yes, so that's seasonal data. So we have to be careful. It's not hidden, but we need to be careful how we handle it.
Now, I made a new friend since I last chatted to you, and I made friends with the head of HR, and I persuaded him to give me some sickness data. So look, I have created my own sickness chart, and I know that last data point there is grey, Karen, but look, that's following 3 wonderful blue dots. So I've arranged to have a bit of a party with the team, because this is clearly very significant improvement. Isn't that just a great news story?
Well, I think I'd hold off on the party just for a moment. So I know that we traditionally look at staff sickness on a rolling 12-month average, but there is a problem with that, because what you're doing, Sam, is looking at staff sickness in your hospital at one time. And the problem with a rolling average is that most of the data in every data point is the same. So when we roll the month forward, only one month changes. We lose the first month, we add the last month. Can we ask you to mute if you've got noise in the background, please? So we're 11 out of the 12 data points are going to be exactly the same. So what you get then is a real smoothing effect through your data, and it's really hard to use that data to manage your services or understand your sickness on the ground in your trust, because those process limits get very close together, because most of the data is the same from this month to next month. I would really prefer that you used an in-month staff sickness chart. So here's an in-month staff sickness chart for exactly the same data. Now you can see that actually, would you say it was telling the same story with your data, Sam?
No, you've made me sad, Karen, because I was all lined up for that party. And well, we've got quite a concerning picture here, haven't we?
Yeah, now that's because when we get a change in the data, it takes a long time to come through in that rolling average chart. So if we look at the two charts together, you can see there are two examples in this data set where we've got significantly poor staff sickness, so higher than average staff sickness. But in the SPC chart for the rolling average, we've got those blue dots. So that's quite confusing. Again, at the end, we've got that massive rise in the data, and I actually know that relates to Omicron. And so we've got a rise in sickness in that data. And yet on the top chart, because of the lag that's built into the system, we get those blue dots. So is that actually helpful to manage your staff sickness in your organisation?
Well, I can see the error of my ways now, Karen.
So it can be useful. There are places where a rolling average is a useful tool. If you're benchmarking across trust to look at their average sickness rates, then it might be helpful. If what you're doing is managing real services on the ground in a hospital, then you really need to be looking at in-month data.
Okay, well, that makes sense. And clearly I've got an operational role, so I'm not that interested in the benchmarking position. You know, I'm trying to make sure that the trust runs as well as it can do. So I'm going to shift across to that in-month view, I think.
Okay, that's probably going to help you a lot.
Now, Karen, I've got another chart here. So this is looking at complaints. Clearly got a bit of a concerning pattern here because we've got those orange dots on the chart.
Well, I pulled this chart up because I can see there, Sam, you've implemented a new complaint system. So what did you hope would happen when you implemented the new complaint system?
Well, I suppose we thought that maybe we might get some more complaints. That was a bit of an aim there.
Yeah, so you wanted to provide a culture where you could capture all the complaints, because if we capture the complaints appropriately, we can deal with any issues that arise. Now, it's not necessarily therefore a problem that you've got more complaints. In fact, having put your new complaint system in place, you might expect that. So do you think more complaints are always worse?
Well, no, actually, now you've pointed it out, because we're going to learn from those complaints, aren't we? If we've got processes in place, we can learn from the complaints. We want to hear people's views. But I didn't know what to do apart from orange, is the honest truth.
Well, there's another colour we can use. So you might have heard of the colour purple. That was a book when I was a girl. But in this context, it's the colour we use when we don't want to make a judgment about whether something is good or bad. So we know that we want to capture all the complaints. We're looking for a rise in the number of complaints we capture, but actually that's fine. And we wouldn't want it to stay high or go higher, but at the moment we want to know that we're capturing the complaints. We want to see the difference, and we don't want to make a judgment. So we could use this purple colour to highlight the fact that there's a statistically significant change, but we're not making a judgment about whether that's good or bad.
Okay, that makes sense. Glad to see my complaints system worked.
Oh, bother, sorry.
Slight little error there, but no, that makes sense, Karen. So I'm just thinking about some other areas where purple might be appropriate. So complaints you've talked about, but it feels like attendances and potentially referrals might be good candidates for the colour purple.
Yeah, absolutely. The things when we don't have a control, we need to know if they're changing, but we don't want to make a judgment about whether that's good or bad. So we would probably use purple for those ones.
And just one clinical area that springs to mind, I don't know what you think, but might caesarean sections be another area where purple is more appropriate?
Yes, it absolutely is, because hospitals monitor their rate of caesarean sections. It's important to know if that rate's changing, but it's not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing if it gets higher or lower. So again, the colour purple is the right thing to do there.
Okay, well, that's been helpful.
And of course, all the tools we've built, whether you're playing with our single tool, our 25 multi-tool, or the SQL or the Power BI templates, they've all got this colour purple built in. And when it says direction of improvement, it says neither. So you just choose neither.
Okay, thanks, Karen. And you built all of those Excel tools, didn't you? Busy girl. Very helpful. Now, this is a wonderful chart because it's demonstrating amazing improvement work, Karen.
It is. It's really good. Now, do you know what you did, Samantha? That's really statistically significant improvement. It looks like it's reasonably sustained. I have a question. What did you do to do this?
Oh, well, we did do something. Actually, I should have annotated the chart, is what you're probably going to say. That's fair enough. This is what we did, Karen. We implemented a text reminder system.
Brilliant. And it looks like that really helped. This is outpatient appointments, and you've got less patients forgetting to come to hospital when they're reminded. That's great. And look at that statistically significant improvement. Now, the chart itself isn't all that useful like this, is it, Sam? Because that mean doesn't look like it relates to the data. The process limits are floating a bit. What do you reckon?
Yeah, that's been quite a step change. So, yeah, it's not really helpful, is it, the SPC chart now?
No, so what we need to do is something called recalculation. Now, recalculation basically means we split the data into two parts, and then we recalculate the mean and the process limits based on the second part of the data. And then you can see what sort of change you've made. So now we can see really clearly that we had a DNA rate around 22%. After our text reminder system was implemented, that's dropped to 15%. That's a really nice improvement. We can also see that that mean and that target are very close together. So if all we want to do is hit the target on average, then we're in a good place. If we want to hit the target every month, then we need to still put some more improvement work into our data. But that's a real improvement. You can see that step change, but you have lost your blue dots, haven't you?
Well, I have, and that, I have to be honest, that has made me sad. The other thing that I've noticed, of course, is the icon has changed, because we had a lovely blue icon and it's now gone grey.
Yeah, well, that's because the system is now not changing any further. So if you want to make more improvement, you need to get some more blue dots and improve further. But at the moment, you're in a really constant place as around 15%.
Now, the other thing that's changed is the assurance icon. And this makes me happier, of course, because before we couldn't achieve the target at all. That's what the F tells me, I think. And now we're going to achieve it half of the time, pretty much.
Yes, almost 50% of the time because of that position of that mean and that process limit. So again, you've lost the orange concerning F. We've got that grey icon indicating flip-flop. That means we will hit or miss the target pretty much at random in this example. But that's a lot better place to be than when we were failing completely.
Okay, that's really helpful. Now, here's another example, serious incidents. I've got lovely blue dots there, so that is fantastic improvement. So this is another situation, isn't it, where I'm going to be able to recalculate the process limits?
Well, I'm not sure about this one. I can see that you've got some really statistically significant improvement. I would be slightly worried about recalculating yet. I'd like to see a bit more data. If we did recalculate it, it would look like this. You can see that there is much lower, so it's dropped from about 4 to about half an instant per month, so 1 every 2 months. But I'm not really very confident about that improvement yet. I'd really much prefer to wait till you've got a few more data points to evidence that sustained change, because it might not be sustained. We might just be having a good period. There are, after all, fluctuations in data. We know there's normal variation. We need to know that that change is sustained and embedded before we make that recalculation. And if it's really that rare, if we're down to 1 or 0 events a month, we might have to change the type of chart we're using. We might need to use to a rare events chart, but I think we'll have to talk about that another day.
Okay, so maybe let's see how the data continues with that, and we could maybe pick that up next time.
Yeah, I think that would be a good conversation to have.
Okay, and look what would happen here if we calculated the process limits. Again, we're going to have that icon change, and we're going to lose the blue dots because we've got a new normal.
Yeah, so we've got that new normal. If we had enough data, we'd have that new normal level, which would be about half, which is definite evidence that we might need to change chart type.
Okay, that's helpful, Karen. Now, this chart, I know from what you've already told me, is this is going to be another candidate for recalculating the process limits. We've got really significant deterioration here that's gone on for a long time. So again, I now understand that this isn't helping me understand what's going on. Just to say, Karen, I am really worried about those orange dots, and I know that when we recalculate, we end up with a chart without the orange dots, but with grey dots. But I'm wondering if you're going to be able to help me with any advice on dealing with the orange, because I have to be honest, I don't really know where to start.
Well, dealing with the orange dots is definitely something we need to do. You're going to need to do some improvement work. You'll need to going to dig into what's causing this decline, because of course now we haven't got orange dots. We've just got constant performance at about 72%, and of course the target is still at 95%. So it's not good enough. We do need to do some improvement work, but I'm sure in your organization you're going to have some people who can help you. Your QI team are going to be really helpful when it comes to this part.
So again, we've had a change in terms of the icons. You have been telling me that I need to be worried about the orange dots, but clearly sometimes I need to be worried about the grey dots as well, don't I?
I absolutely always say that grey is not always good. Just because it's not changing, if we're not hitting the target, that is definitely not good enough, and we need to do something about it. So do remember, even though this chart now describes that data much, much better, you can see what the average performance is, you can see where the range of variability you're expecting is. We can't just rest on our laurels because it's not getting worse. We need to do something to make it better.
Okay, so I can see that the recalculation point is actually really important, and you did share with me last time, Karen, some examples of what good reporting looks like, and we haven't yet implemented this, but we are going to be implementing this view to use in our meeting. So it's important that we do the recalculation to make sure that this is right, isn't it?
Absolutely, because of course, if you don't do the recalculation, we've seen how those icons change if we don't do the recalculation, or if we do the recalculation. And if we don't do it, we're going to drop our variables into the wrong box, aren't we? We're going to think about the fact that, so the one we were just looking at is staying the same, but failing to hit the target. So it would be in that middle row in the box to the right. Really important that our metrics fall in the right boxes so they prompt us to take the right actions.
Because this is going to focus our conversation in our meetings. That's the intention. So yeah, I'll speak to the BI team about making sure we've got those recalculations in place.
Excellent. That's a really good idea.
And
Okay.
well, you suggested that this might be helpful to put in my report as well, I think.
Yeah, we've kind of come up, the Making Data Count team came up with this table of things which explain the technical description of what those icons mean, because we do get that it's a bit tricky, and especially when we're producing publicly received documents, we need to have a clear explanation of what it's all about. And this is a really helpful document which tells us what the technical description is, what does it mean, and what we should do. So that's one approach to understanding the icons. And I really like this from North East Ambulance Service. So they've really taken it a step further. They've put it in that matrix format, and you can see what all of those different combinations of icons might mean. So it's a great place to start.
And it's just very plain English, this one, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think I might adapt that. So, Karen, it's feeling like there aren't absolute fixed rules on when to recalculate process limits. Is that fair?
Sadly, that's true. I would love, because I'm a scientist and I like rules and a mathematician, I would love it if the rules were clear. But I think actually, remember that we're working in real world situations. There are no hard and fast rules, but there are some guidelines. So the first one is that we need a sustained change in our data. So statistical significance and something that's changed, not just 1 point that falls outside the process limit, or even 7 points in a run or a shift. No, we want a sustained statistical significance. It's really, really helpful if we know what caused it. So in your example, Sam, you'd instituted a text warning system, and it really worked. So that's a great help to us about thinking about when to recalculate the data. And also, we need to be confident, as I said, that that change is embedded. Now, those are the hard and fast rules. And that's what we'd probably go with most of the time. But then if we're looking at real charts in a real setting, we need to make those charts meaningful. So if you've got something that's changing a lot and you can't really describe what the process is like, then that might also be an argument for recalculating the process limits to give a better description of the data. But of course, you do need quite a few points to make those process limits robust enough to detect ongoing change. Because sadly, if we're doing improvement work, we need to be very aware that unless we keep doing the improvement work, keep sticking to our guns, then we might see our performance slipping again.
And I did order a little Making Data Count guide, a little booklet, and there's
did
this
you?
nice flowchart in there.
Yep, that flowchart says exactly what we've just explained, so that's really helpful. Now, this is a video Nick, my colleague, and I put together, and it goes through a lot more of examples about when you recalculate, how you recalculate, and why you recalculate. So that's a resource that's there for you if that would be helpful.
Okay, fabulous. Now, can we talk about the orange and how to deal with the orange?
Yes, it's a really big topic. So I'm sure, well, I'd be interested to know, do any of you feel like when you're in your organisations, you're playing a game a bit like whack-a-mole? You start with a problem, you identify a problem over here, and you go off to deal with it, and you whack that mole, and then something else happens, and you rush over there, and you whack that mole, and we don't actually take the time and the trouble to follow through to absolutely get to the point where we have dealt with the problem seriously, significantly and well. So it's really difficult not to adopt the whack-a-mole approach to life in the NHS, but we really need to do good improvement work. Now, we could talk about improvement work, but actually, do you know what? There are some real experts in this stuff. And so we'd like to point you towards your improvement team. Now, you can use those SPC icon tables we talked about in the first step to identify what battles we might be going to fight. So we can use these to identify where we've got ongoing deterioration and failure, or we've got something that's beginning to fail, or something that's not hitting the target and not changing, all of that. So it's a great place to start. But then we need to do some properly structured, properly thought through improvement work. So what do we do? Well, we're probably going to frame those questions around what do I want to change? What do I want to achieve? And where am I going to start? So what are we going to achieve? Our best advice is keep it simple, keep your aims clear. What do you want to change? How do you know when you've got to where you want to be? And what are you going to do? That's the crux of it. What are you going to do to make sure you get there? And this is all embodied really in the model for improvement, which I'm sure you've come across. It asks those questions. It's a structured way of doing this. And those questions at the top are really important. And then we go around our cycle, the plan, do, study, act cycle. The study bit is quite often the SPC chart that tells us if we're changing and improving. So, but I think we're going to point people in the direction of their QI teams, and also we do step 6 on making data count, which is all about this.
So I would echo what you said, Karen. So I have come across QI teams before. Here's a lovely head of QI, lovely dress. Look, she's made up the whole set of the RAG report for today, hasn't she? Because she's wearing yellow randomly. So QI teams, you will have them, I'm sure. Service improvement teams, they can be really helpful with things like process mapping, ideas generation. I love a driver diagram, Karen. I have used this in a past life, very useful tool to use. And they're really good at facilitating workshops and getting people together. So if you haven't come across your QI team, then go and make friends with them. And they might be able to help you out with things like templates. So I've used this template before and found it really helpful. So they're going to be really helpful in terms of creating that plan of action. You may well, of course, have a lot of people that are QSA trained within your organisations. So if you haven't made friends with this team, then go and find them. They're going to help you with your PDSA cycles. But I think it's worth just stating, Karen, that I think my experience is one of the most important things is having the right people involved when we're deciding what we're going to be doing, because we need everybody involved in the process to contribute to that plan, to think about what the measurement is, to do the work, of course, because work doesn't magically happen, does it, once we've got a plan? We are, of course, going to use SPC charts to demonstrate whether what we've done has worked. And then we're actually going to look at the data in a meeting and decide if we need to go around that circle again. So I think these are the key ingredients for success. So Karen, that's been helpful. And I think I will sign up to step 6, because I believe you go into quite a lot more detail, don't you?
Yes, we get some QI experts in who can talk about this in detail.
Okay, but we did say that we were going to talk about, well, the words as well. Yep. And you're going to be really delighted with me now, really delighted, because I've not only been creating SPC charts, I've been using them in my reports, and I've been creating some really good narrative to describe what's going on. So can I show you?
Please do. I'd be delighted to see what you've been up to.
Well, there you go. Let's have a look then. So I'm really proud of this. You can see I've used your multi-tool.
I love the fact you've triangulated different metrics together. That's a really nice thinking there about emergency department, Sam. Very good.
Okay, thank you. Gold star for me then. So I've used the multi-tool and I've also written some narrative. Can I read it out to you?
Yes.
So this is going to just really explain how this all fits together, I think. So there was an improvement in ED performance this month compared to last month, and that was driven by the significant reduction in attendances. There was a really concerning jump in beds occupied by long stay patients, and this was related to the increase in patients who no longer meet the criteria to reside. The occupancy rate saw an increase of 0.75 compared to last month, and look at those handover delays, they were 0.6% higher than the rate in November. That's good, isn't it? That took me quite a long time to write that.
I have one or two questions about that, Samantha, and I think
sometimes they do, sometimes they have a letter.
I think we might have to have a longer
Is that
conversation.
on mute? Could you pop yourself on mute, please? Thank you.
So let's have a look at your first statement. I think there's a problem here, Sam. Would you say that that chart really showed an improvement in ED performance? I would say that what it's showing is a significant run of poorer performance in ED, not an improvement. So I'd be quite concerned about that statement. I don't think that's an improvement. I think it's part of a run of deterioration.
But
If
Karen,
we're looking,
it was higher though. It was higher than last month. It was better than
higher.
last month.
But Samantha, think about all the things we've been thinking about. We're interested in how data changes over time and identifying significant trends in the data, not just looking at 2-point comparisons. That's never going to be helpful. So you've got great charts, but your commentary doesn't really say the same as your charts. If you look at the attendance chart, you would absolutely say that we're in the position where we've had higher attendances, but right now our attendance rate is pretty much constant. It's around 12,000. It hasn't changed very much apart from that period there where we had higher attendances. And right now it's back in that normal range. Absolutely, your occupancy rates are off the scale, and that is always going to cause your hospital a problem with its flow. And you can see that really highly significantly occupied hospital. And look at that brilliant work, which you've hardly picked up on at all, where we've got that reduction in the number of patients who meet the criteria to reside. I guess your teams have been working really hard at reducing patients who shouldn't be in hospital. So there are some different things I would be saying about this, which are quite different to what you've said.
And I bet you're going to say that I shouldn't have said what I said about the handover delays.
Well, that's a tiny change, isn't it? I mean, really, is that significant in that context? I don't think so.
Well, I have to be honest on that one, Karen. I feel like if something isn't changing, I can't really say that, can I? There's always a pressure to talk about and changing the data. And I'm going to be honest, that's why I picked out November, because I could say something about November.
Yeah, that's really shocking behaviour. I'm quite distressed by you doing that. So you picked a month where you could demonstrate there was an improvement. Well, I'm sorry, Samantha, but that isn't really telling the story of the data. Actually, what you've got is expected variation. Now, we need to tell a true story, because if we want to manage our services, we want to improve our services, we absolutely have to be honest about what the data are saying.
So is your advice to me, if nothing is changing, do you think I should just write, nothing's really changing here, it's just as expected?
Yes, I think you should comment on the fact that nothing is changing. I think you should comment on the fact you can or can't hit the target. And I think it's always worthwhile reflecting on the variability of the process that you're describing.
Okay, well, can you tell me anything more about narrative? Because this was my best stab. That's as good as I could do.
Well, I think we could think really hard, but I think it's a longer conversation. So the purpose of narrative has several functions. So we need to tell that story of the data. We need to be describing in words what the charts actually say to us. We need to highlight where we've got variation. Is there too much variation? Is it changing? Is it significant? And we'll see that both in the dots on our charts and the icons which represent them. We need to identify where those changes are significant because we need to talk about them and what we're going to do about them. And we're also going to have to highlight where we need action. Now, at that point, we might want to take a breather because actually in the NHS at the moment, there are an awful lot of things which are in crisis. So at that point, we have to ask, is this a trust priority? Is it something my organisation need to deal with now? If it is, we have to identify what actions we're going to take and who's going to lead on those actions. And even more importantly than that, how long we think it's going to take for those actions to take place. Now, if all of that goes into our narrative, that analytical stuff, that business intelligence stuff, and that clinical and operational input, we're going to have a brilliant narrative which tells the story. It's going to be action focused, it adds value, and it acts as a really good audit trail as we go forward to how we're doing on the improvements we're trying to make.
And this is looking like it's two different sets of people. Would that be fair?
Yes, it absolutely is. So quite often the business intelligence, your analytical teams will provide those charts with the dots on and the icons on, but they can't tell you what to do because they're not clinical, they're not operational, they're not working on the ground. So it is absolutely a handshake between our analytical people and our clinical and operational input. The job can't be done without both parts.
Okay, so I'm just wondering, I mean, it feels like we might need to talk about the narrative stuff a bit more, but should I take this as a bit of homework to go away and write some better narrative? Do you think that would be useful?
I'd love to see you try and write some better narrative, and then we can talk about whether you've hit the nail on the head.
Okay. Thanks, Karen. But that's a longer conversation, I think, that we might kick off with next time.
Yeah, I don't think we can fit it in today.
So, should we come out of our role play now?
Let's do that. Although I'm not sure I'm very different in.
No, you're not very different. I try to be a bit different. Okay, so hopefully that's been useful to you. This is our thoughts on what you might want to go away and do now. So, well, hopefully you have got some SPC charts now, and if you haven't got some, well, that's step 0 really, isn't it? Create some SPC charts or get your business intelligence team to create some charts. But do have a look at whether you've got process limit recalculations in there, because we can't stress strongly enough that this is really going to have an impact on you understanding your data and understanding that assurance position if you have got targets. And I think it's fair to say, would you agree, Karen, when we look at reporting, this is something that we see happen not as frequently?
Yes, and we should also say that in all the tools, certainly in the Excel tools, it's really simple to put in a recalculation. You just choose a date and it does it for you.
So that's really important. So go away and have a look. If you're not friends with your service improvement or quality improvement team, then I suggest that you go and make friends. You might also, of course, want to sign up to step 6, which you deliver, Karen, don't you, with a colleague from the Northwest region who's an improvement expert.
Yep, that's right.
You can learn about the double diamond in that session. That's something I hadn't heard of before on my travels. So there you go. There's a little taster for step 6. You might want to think about selecting a measure where you've got lots of those orange dots to focus some improvement efforts. And it is difficult at the moment, Karen, isn't it? Because so much is showing orange. When you look at data across the country, there is so much that's showing orange.
But we are seeing some shoots of improvement in lots of places now, so that's really encouraging.
But you can't improve everything at the same time, so maybe
Absolutely
select
not.
an area. And what's the last as well? The last suggestion is that people, this could be an interesting one, I think. You might want to go away and you might want to either read the narrative that's in reports that are provided to you, or you might want to do some self-critique of what you've written. So I know that I made up my narrative there, but actually that is very reflective of narrative that we see written by real people in real organisations. And yes, it is true that sometimes people pick out random months that have no interrelationship between them just so that they can say that something was better.
Yeah, we really want to avoid that.
Okay, so have you joined the Future Space yet? If you haven't, then it would be good for you to join up, and we're nearly up to 12,000 people now, which is quite remarkable on the Future Space. That's a good place where you can go and ask any silly questions, and people there will help you. So it's a good opportunity for sharing. You might have already ordered some essentials guides. I've still got 18 boxes in my hallway. So if anybody wishes to order some more guides, I would be very, very happy. You can order those spuddling cards as well that we've referenced before. You also might want to promote the next Step 1 training session. So of course, we've done these sessions in a bespoke way for the Proud2bOps network, but we do provide a whole range of training sessions. Now, Step 1, you don't need to do because we pretty much covered that last time, but this is the last session that we'll be running pre the summer break. So 23rd of May. That is, of course, CPD certified, so you might want to promote that session to your colleagues. And we've got the nice little QR code here that you can take a photo of, and that will link you through to the registration links, to ordering essentials guides, and to lots of other fun stuff there. Now, tomorrow, Karen, do you remember it's a very important day?
It's a very important day.
Without mentioning this. So tomorrow is a very important day, because it's a big birthday day. Actually, it's 2 big birthday days. So what's 100 tomorrow, Karen?
Statistical process control was the first paper was published 100 years ago today, tomorrow.
Tomorrow, there you go. But it's another big birthday tomorrow.
Yeah, the really important birthday from our point of view, Sam, is that we've been doing this for 6 years. Making Data Count was born 6 years ago.
And look, these are cakes, real cakes. Karen and her husband made the Making Data Count looking cake. Isn't that amazing? We did have a little party in a pub, didn't we? At our own expense, I should say. And a trust that I actually visited yesterday, Southern Healthcare, they made the Dotty cake. Isn't that amazing? So think of us tomorrow. Raise a cup of tea to toast Making Data Counts. But before we go, we should mention what we're going to talk about next time. Well, we're going to propose what we're going to talk about next time, because obviously you've got an opportunity to influence this, because we have got a few minutes that we could even talk here. So I think we'd like to talk more about narrative, and Karen would like to critique my second go at writing some narrative. Now also, we thought it might be helpful to talk about a methodology to set targets in a methodical way, rather than doing the old finger in the wind approach that we might have used previously. So do people think it would be useful to talk about how we might use targets in an improvement sense to help actually improve services? This isn't about nationally set targets. This is about setting targets for ourselves to drive that improvement efforts. We're seeing some thumbs up there. I thought it might also be useful to have a conversation around how we can be better at triangulating data. And that's something that we get asked quite often. How do we start to have more triangulated conversations? So as it stands, that's what we were thinking of covering. Do you want us to give us a shocked face if you disagree? We'll see how many shocked faces we get. But otherwise, I think we will proceed as is. Whilst we've got you here, Karen, we could cover in the 4th session the work that you've done with Deb on elective recovery. Do you want to describe a bit about what that is?
So one of our colleagues, Deb, works at Leicester, and she's in charge of elective services, and so she's managing reducing those long waiting lists which built up over COVID, and so she needed some tools to do that. So we've developed a tool which looks at how you can understand if the work you're doing is managing your waiting list well enough to reduce to the targets you need to reduce to. So we've got some tools on that which we can share with you and talk to you about, if that would be helpful.
So do you want to maybe type in the chat or give us a thumbs up if you think that would be useful? It's out to test with a few trusts at the moment, isn't it? But the reports are that it's being a useful tool, I think.
Yep, it's out with a few trusts just to make sure it works before we let everyone else have it.
But by the time we get to the 4th session, we will know that it's working beautifully, because if it isn't, Cam will fix it. So I think maybe if we talk about that in the last session, that would be helpful. Okay, look, we finished a bit early, so Emma might be really happy with us because we're giving people a tea break, aren't we? So look, we've got an opportunity for any questions, and I've just reused this nice visual because it took me quite a long time to do.
Thank you.
Thanks, Emma.
Thank you so much, and thank you as always for giving us a real practical session where actually we can turn up the dial and the relevance for ops managers and leaders. So can everyone just do a bit of a round of applause and thank you for Karen and Sam, because believe me, they do get really into this role play aspect and really put the heart and soul in it, and they're very good at it too. So imagine what they're like in person when they visit your trust. I daren't imagine, but there you go. But well done, and thank you so much to Karen and to Sam. I mean, these sessions are such rich, valuable insight for ops managers to get to the real practical day-to-day, what actually happens for the boots on the ground of how we review, plan, design and deliver services. So being able to look at it through that lens has been fantastic. Thank you so much to you both. I'm already excited for our third session in our series of 4 learning webinar series around Proud2bOps does data and information. The third session is on Tuesday, the 18th of June. And then the 4th session we're looking at is 11th of July, round about that area. So what we'll do is we'll get the titles and information out in advance. They will be sent out from all of our diary invites from Proud2bOps, and they're on our website as well. So please do get involved, keep turning up, invite your colleagues who you think would benefit from being in this space. And can I just say massive congratulations. I can't believe it's 6 years for Making Data Count. It seems like it's been there much, much longer. And I think that just shows and demonstrates the scale of the movement that you've created and kept alive and sustained. So it's fantastic to see it keep growing, and please do celebrate.
And it's great as well.
They're
both kind of grassroots movements, aren't they? And do you know what? When we started with Making Data Count, we didn't even have a project plan, did we, Karen? We just got together and we thought about a good idea and we just did it. And it's just grown and grown and grown. So we might be up to 10 more steps. What do you think in the next year?
Go for it. I say go for it, but I think you're right. It demonstrates that we can have grassroots movements such as Making Data Count and Proud2bOps that is led and owned by the community and the people that are within them. And that's what's given it its success. So it just demonstrates that we can make a difference and we can improve together. So well done, and thank you ever so much. Please do head over to our website for more information about all webinar sessions that we've shared. The remaining 2 sessions around Proud2bOps does data and information, and we're always putting on energizing sessions that we hear that you need and you want. So please do keep abreast through our Proud2bOps website. And all that's to say is thank you so much, everyone. I think we were just over 90 people in the space this afternoon. So it was great to have so many of you here, and please keep encouraging others to turn up and get involved. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Sam. And thank you all for your time this afternoon. And go and grab yourselves a cup of tea or a bit of a respite for the next 5 minutes or so. Thank you so much, everyone. Take care.
Thanks, Anna.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.